Good evening and a very Merry Christmas Eve and welcome to GB News. I'm Alastair Stewart. Last Christmas, families across the UK were stripped of the ability to see loved ones after a terrible year for both the economy and people's mental and physical health. This Christmas, however, we have been given a bit of respite, as most of us can again celebrate together, despite the looming cloud of yet another COVID variant. Shortly, I'll be speaking with a professor of bacteriology at the University of Aberdeen to hear his take on the pandemic 2 years on. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here's Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Alistair. This is your news at 10 o'clock. 122,186 COVID cases have been recorded in the UK in the latest 24-hour period, marking a third consecutive record day. Elsewhere, figures from the Office for National Statistics show a record 1.7 million people were infected with COVID-19 last week. Amid a steep rise in cases, vaccination centres will be open even tomorrow, and Boxing Day as part of a Jingle Jab campaign. In this year's Christmas message, Boris Johnson is urging people to come forward to get a COVID booster jab.
We know that things remain difficult, but for millions of families up and down the country, I hope and believe that this Christmas is and will be significantly better than the last in this vital respect, that we can celebrate together with those we love and raise our glasses to those who can't be with us.
The UK is set to offer 12-month visas to social care workers in an attempt to combat staff shortages due to coronavirus. The temporary measures will come into effect early next year and are expected to attract thousands of staff. To qualify, migrant workers will need to be paid a minimum annual salary of £20,480. The Queen's Christmas Day message is expected to be particularly personal this year, as it's her first since the death of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. A photograph released by Buckingham Palace ahead of her televised address to the nation tomorrow shows the Queen at Windsor Castle. Her Majesty is accompanied by a single framed photo of her diamond wedding anniversary in 2007. A drug which could halve the risk of death from some prostate cancers may be made available on the NHS. A study published in The Lancet found hormone therapy, abiraterone, could be effective in reducing the death rate of patients from 15% to 7%. More than 52,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer in the UK every year. The most expensive ever telescope is blasting into space tomorrow, 100 times more sensitive than its predecessor, Hubble. The James Webb Space Telescope will be launched on Christmas Day after a delay due to the weather. Scientists hope that it will shed new light on the birth of the universe. Well, that's your News 8 update. I'll be back at the top of the hour. Now let's return to Alistair.
Karen, thank you very much. 2021 has been another year overshadowed by the coronavirus pandemic. We're just hours away from Christmas Day, and we've seen yet another record broken, with the UK reporting over 120,000 new infections earlier today. The pandemic was very much on the minds of leaders across England, Scotland and Wales in their Christmas messages this year.
And though the time for buying presents is theoretically running out, there is still a wonderful thing you can give your family and the whole country. And that is to get that jab, whether it's your first or your second or your booster, so that next year's festivities are even better than this year's.
Vaccination is, above all else, a demonstration of compassion for and solidarity with each other. By continuing to show compassion and solidarity, I hope we can all enjoy the best and the safest festive period possible. And, of course, I hope above all else that we can all look forward to a much brighter and better new year.
A small army of people have sacrificed their Christmas plans to work in vaccine centres across the country to make sure we all have the protection we need against this awful virus. Their dedication and service means so much to us all. Thank you for everything you do.
So the voice there of the politicians, but let's take an objective look back at the pandemic now. Joining me is Professor Hugh Pennington, bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen. Hugh, always a pleasure to see you. First and foremost, how do you rate the current data on infections, hospitalisations and deaths? Where do we stand?
Lots and lots of cases, but mostly in young people. And we know that young people escape this virus pretty well because it only really goes for people with high-risk sort of lives, the elderly, people immunosuppressed after cancer treatment, and people in those categories. And what the Omicron hasn't done yet, it hasn't really gone for the old people. It's beginning to show signs that it might just have a little bit of trickle from the younger people to the older. And then, of course, the crucial data is not so much the number of cases, but how many of these older people, how many of the high-risk people are going to be seriously affected by the virus. Now, of course, there are very good signs in that the virus itself doesn't seem to be as nasty as Delta or even any of the other predecessors. All these variants that have come and gone, it's not as nasty as them. And, you know, that was preliminary data from South Africa, and we said, well, let's hold on because South Africa has a young pop, but it's holding up in the UK. That's very good news. And there's other good news as well. Of course, the booster is giving very good protection against Omicron, better than a flu jab gives you against flu, even if it isn't quite as good as it was against Delta and the predecessors.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got some antiviral drugs coming along, which look very promising.
Yeah. Tell me this, Hugh, quite bluntly. Is the optimism that so many people are sharing based on science, or do you believe it's essentially political? We've just heard three of the leaders, Wales, Scotland and the UK, sounding optimistic.
I think the optimism is soundly based, that we're in a much better position than if Omicron had hit us, last year or the year before. Much better placed because of these things I've just been mentioned. That doesn't mean to say that there won't be some very sad cases, that hospitals are under an enormous amount of pressure. We knew that anyway. They're always under pressure at this time of year anyway. So what's new about that? Let's hope they don't come under even more pressure because of COVID cases being ill enough to go into intensive care. And that's the big question. That's the outstanding data that we really need to see. We haven't seen too much of the spillover of the virus into the elderly, causing them to be driven into intensive care. Let's hope that continues. And let's hope that most of those people have had their boosters. And let's hope that gives them as good a protection as we think it should do.
Yeah. The optimism can always run the risk of breeding complacency. So what are the key things that you hope that most folk out there will continue to do even over this festive period?
Well, yes, and they have been basically being very cautious. They haven't been going anywhere near as much as shopkeepers would like into their premises, and events, clearly many events have been cancelled. And that's not due to, the heavy hand of the government. That's due to people just behaving as they have done for quite a long time, being sensible, using their common sense to saying, I don't want to catch this bloody awful virus. And the one thing I can do, apart from having the vaccine, which is by far the most important thing, is having this sort of personal kind of social distancing and all that kind of thing, which is going to also have an effect in reducing the impact of the virus. Even although we know the virus is doing extremely well, it's buzzing around at an unprecedented rate, it's still, because of its track record in not being as nasty, I think we're going to perhaps get away without having any more lockdowns.
Excellent news. Final one, and just a quick one. Are you at all worried as an academic that the modellers, the predictors who've taken such a caning these last few days have lost the public's trust?
I think sometimes they do. because they give the full picture, and people focus on the bad part of the news. And there's nothing wrong with the model as saying on the worst case and on the best case. And they really have to do that. They have to do that so the government ministers can make policy. But of course, sometimes their bad news is the thing that hits the headlines, gets into the newspapers, even gets on television, if I may say so.
You may say whatever you like, Professor. That's why we invited you along. Hugh, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. And on a personal note, from all of us here at GB News, a very happy Christmas to you and a peaceful and healthy New Year. Thank you. That's Professor Hugh Pennington, bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen. Now, the clock is ticking down. But before I leave you this evening, one of the great successes of these last few hours I've been sharing my evening with you, I want to share with you a little bit of a fascinating conversation that I had earlier with the Canadian NORAD Regional Commander, Major General Eric Kenny. He's usually preparing to track incoming nuclear missiles, enemy aircraft and the rest of it. But today, he had the hugely important and, let's be honest, exciting job of tracking Santa's movements across the globe. He explained to me how he receives the full support of his NORAD team on this very special mission.
And I can tell you that he does enjoy having the pilots come alongside him, recognizing that he has to slow down, actually, for us to join up with him. And he always gives us a wave. We believe it's a ho, 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 and a little bit of a wink as he then carries on with his mission. But one of our roles that we do 365 days of the year, 24/7, is provide aerospace control, aerospace warning, and maritime warning for all of Canada and the United States. Yeah. So this is one of those missions, as I said, that we like to do on the 24th of December.
General also told me he once tracked Santa in an F-18. How much he must have enjoyed that. Just before we end the show, let's take a final look, a latest look, at where Santa is right now. Currently, well, he was last seen over Wolfsburg, Germany. We were in India a little while ago, if you remember rightly. Getting closer. Now, the reason NORAD tracks Santa is a rather unusual one. It happened by accident way back in 1955. A young child tried to reach Father Christmas on the phone and dialed a misprinted number from a department store ad, which actually put him through, accidentally, to the Continental Air Defence Command Operations Centre. From then on, NORAD has dutifully reported on Santa's location for children across the world, with around 24 million people following his journey each year. Across this evening, a team of volunteers will handle around 12,000 emails, and wait for it, more than 100,000 phone calls from more than 200 countries. And if you want to continue tracking Santa's journey this evening, head over to our GB News Facebook page for a live stream at GB News. And indeed, to learn more about NORAD, you can visit their website, which is noradsanta.org. Good luck to them. Thank you so much for joining us here at GB News this Christmas Eve. It's been a real pleasure, and I'll be back again next week after a Christmas break to bring you some more special programming as we head towards 2022. But stay tuned for a special programme of the best of Talking Pints with Nigel Farage as he looks back at some of his best guests from 2021. But from me and from my entire team here at GB News, a very Merry Christmas to you and a peaceful, prosperous and healthy New Year. Good night. God bless.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The weather this Christmas is all about the contrast. Cold but bright in the north and east, rain elsewhere and fairly mild in the southwest. And you can see those contrasts on this map. The blues there across northern parts of the UK, whilst milder air affects southwestern areas, and these weather fronts moving in and then stalling through central zones. So for Christmas Eve night, an area of rain moving north across central parts of the country, tending to fizzle out through the end of the night, but leaving a lot of cloud and damp conditions. Heavier rain returns to South Wales and the southwest.